Hello and welcome to Core Review Meetings in Tier 1. My name is Janice Pizzuto and it is my pleasure to serve you today. I come to you from the Oregon Response to Instruction and Implementation team. I'm an Oregon RTI implementation coach. Our project serves the state of Oregon. We help school districts across the state to implement RTI systems effectively and sustainably to improve outcomes for their students. As you can see by the map on the left, we serve districts across the state from far north all the way to the eastern regions, all the way to the southern regions. We have hubs in Roseburg, Tigard-Tualatin, Bend, and Ontario. Our project supports schools over a time period of 3 years to implement sustainable, effective RTI implementations. In addition to working for the Oregon Response to Instruction and Intervention team, I am a consultant and I have worked on the Learning Forward Oregon board. It was my pleasure to start the Learning Forward chapter in Oregon. If you're not familiar with Learning Forward, it is a professional organization dedicated to improving the professional learning standards across the state and then internationally. Many international schools actually use Learning Forward materials for their professional learning. They have standards for professional learning that have been adopted and used in the United States and internationally. If you're interested, check out Learning Forward. In addition, I'm a learner, reader, and collaborator. As you can see from the pictures, I am a family gal. This is my husband, Dan. This is our son, Michael. He is currently working for Hulu in Santa Monica, California. And this is our daughter, Angela. She works in Salem, Oregon, and she works for the social services as a drug treatment and mental health court coordinator. She started with Child Protective Services. Our family loves to travel. We love spending time together. And of course, we always like to spend time with our mascot, Max, our puppy. Although I'm committed to our educational endeavors, it's my family that feeds and supports me and encourages me to go on each and every day. We always like to say, together we're better, and without them I wouldn't be able to do the work I'm doing here with you today. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. You may have seen this before. This is the Oregon Response to Instruction and Intervention 9 Essential Components, the house that Oregon RTI built. We say Nike has their swoosh, we have the house. Implementing an RTI system is not simple. It takes time, effort, collaboration, and a focus on systems strategically being implemented. In our system, we really put a focus on culture, a growth mindset, high expectations for all students, and creating a culture of collaboration to improve outcomes for students. The foundation of culture is critical to implementing an effective and sustainable response to intervention system. Quite often, school districts will only implement RTI with the idea of interventions, progress monitoring, and SLD decision making. When we work with schools, we make sure that they're focusing on culture, leadership, teaming and database decision making, and importantly, the foundation of professional learning. Today, you're experiencing professional learning. All of these pillars and the foundation come together to complete the essential components of an RTI system. Today, we're going to be talking deeply about teaming and database decision making, and we're going to be diving into core decision, teaming and database decision making for core materials and instruction. So we're looking at the pillar of teaming and database decision making through the lens of core instruction. In this session, you will review problem-solving process across all tiers. We'll learn about a team database decision-making process to support all students. So this is a multi-stakeholder problem-solving team, you could say, and these are what we call core review meetings. We hope that you become familiar with the core review meeting agenda. For a moment, would everybody hold up your core review meeting agenda? I hope that you have that printed out. I also want to check in on items that you should have. Do you have the handout of PowerPoints? And do you have a note-taking device? If you don't have those things, maybe you should pause the video here and get those items together. You're going to get to see an educator lead and support meetings at the school level. In this presentation, you'll see Summer lead and support her teachers through the core review meetings. Summer was trained by myself with an on-site facilitated team meeting. You're going to get to see Summer as she leads her teachers independently to work toward looking at making decisions to improve instruction for students. And you're going to have an opportunity to review and become familiar with the agenda. With our RTI system, we have multiple teaming structures. Today, we're talking about the core review meetings. The purpose of the core review meetings is to review the effectiveness of tiered systems of support and make any adjustments. This is where teachers, teacher teams, multiple stakeholders come together and decide what is it that our students need most, how can we support one another, what are we going to do to make improvements tomorrow in our instruction, and what support might we need to get there. In this meeting, we're talking about all students. This is something that is different and unique to the RTI system that you may have seen in the past. With Oregon RTI, we have a heavy emphasis on improving core instruction and instruction for all students. The data that you'll be using in these meetings is your screening, CBM data. Sometimes teams bring attendance data and office and discipline referrals if you're looking at behavior in addition to that. The other meetings that you'll be learning about further down as you go into your RTI systems next year, you'll be learning about the group intervention review meetings, or what some people call 20% meetings. These are the meetings that we use to make changes for students in intervention. It's not for all students. These meetings are for some students, for students that we see that need additional instruction. The data that we're going to use in those meetings is progress monitoring data. The other set of meetings that you'll learn about after the 20% review meetings is called individual problem solving meetings. These meetings further intensify interventions for those who are in need. After they've received interventions in the group intervention review meetings and we have decided that they have not had substantial growth, that is not a group problem, that it's an individual problem, your team will get together and utilize a protocol and a teaming format to look at those few students to make important educational decisions to improve outcomes for them. The data that will be reused at those meetings is progress monitoring data. Today we're talking about core. Core is for all students. In a traditional RTI model, some people will see the triangle like this: green, yellow, and red. In the green zone, students are getting core instruction. In the yellow zone, students are getting additional instruction. And in the red zone, students are getting intensive instruction. We like to make sure that as people are looking at the triangle, we're looking at it through the lens of core is for all. All students receive highly effective research-based core instruction. Unfortunately, when we start working with schools and districts, sometimes we find that some students are pulled out of core. They're pulled out of core for special education services. They're pulled out of core for English language development classes. They're pulled out of core for some other type of service. And they are actually not getting more instruction. They end up getting less. So it's critical to know that core is for all students. When we speak about core, we expect that all students receive the 90-minute uninterrupted reading block of core instruction. The goal of core tier 1 is to get 75 to 80% students proficient. In some of our higher performing schools and districts, 75 to 80% is actually met easily. They're looking toward 85 to 90, 95%, and then they start examining, are the students in the green zone growing? Are our students who are in the green zone, who come to us at benchmark in core, are they growing at a rate that is ambitious, or a rate that is average, or a rate that is below average? Examining growth in core is effective and critical to move students to higher levels, regardless of where they come to us from. When we're talking about core, we're talking about three things. We're talking about the materials that you use, the curriculum that comes, but we know that curriculum doesn't come done. We also need to have adequate time allotted. Our recommendation is a 90-minute uninterrupted reading block. Even if we have the appropriate materials and the appropriate time, what we know is what teachers do matters most. Instructional strategies mapped onto materials and effectively used during time make the difference for an effective strategy and making a difference for core instruction for all students. The goal is to have students involved and teachers using effective instructional strategies during that core time, materials time, and teacher actions. Why do we look at a whole grade level for core instruction for 100% meetings? We want to determine, is what we're doing being effective? Is the instruction we're providing working for most students? Are most of our students growing? Do we have 50% of students coming in at benchmark, 25% at risk, and 25% at high risk? Or do we have 85% of our students coming in at benchmark, 10% at some risk, and 5% at high risk? RTI is really TIR. Thinking is required is what we like to say. What does low risk in DIBELS really mean? If my student is at a low risk in the DIBELS benchmark, what is that telling me? The DIBELS benchmark tells us that students come in at the 40th percentile. They're green, they're good to go, meaning that they are at the lowest possible risk to be safe. For no reason does that mean that they've arrived. For my Michael and Angela, who you saw in the pictures, I didn't want them to be at the 40th percentile. I wanted them to go above the 40th percentile and beyond. And for each and every one of my students that I worked with, I hoped for them to meet above and rise to highest levels. The DIBELS benchmark is set to tell us who's safe. Should we be worried or not? Are these students going to continue on to be safe given the good instruction if we continue to give it to them? Roland Good and Ruth Kaminsky would say there's no fate but what we make. And it's not a guarantee to success. Just because I start on track doesn't mean I'm going to stay on track. So being clear on what the low risk in DIBELS means for us is really critical. If our students are in that green zone or low risk, what does it mean? It means they will continue to stay at low risk if we continue to provide high quality, effective, evidence-based instruction. We can improve instruction so that all students continue to grow and improve. We want to reduce the number of students that are in the yellow zone, reduce the number of students that are in the red zone, but we also want to continue to stretch and grow our green zone students. In the 100% meeting process, the core review meeting process, we can support one another in attaining growth for students. The purpose of these 100% data meetings, core review meetings, is to determine if the grade level is benefiting from core instruction and to refine that core instruction to better meet the needs of all students at the grade level. This is an opportunity for teacher teams to get together and collaborate and think and adjust instruction the very next day. Sometimes in teacher team meetings, trying to make decisions to improve outcomes for students can feel like this.
All right, we're going to be designing an experiment to look for the annihilation spectrum resulting from dark matter collisions in space.
Ooh, dark matter. We better bring a flashlight. I was making a joke.
I'm the boss. I make the jokes.
Sorry, go ahead and make your joke.
This is not the time for joking. We're doing serious research which requires complete and utter focus.
All right, let's buckle down and work. Sheldon?
What?
I need an aspirin.
Top desk drawer. Thank you. All right? Yes, good.
We can't get stuck problem-miring. We must take action. Together we're better, and if we're solution-focused and action-oriented, we can really make powerful decisions for our students. I don't know if you've ever participated in a meeting that felt quite like this. I hope not. I've had some that have been stressful and we haven't gotten to resolution, but you will find that having the core review meeting process and protocol will help you move from just these congenial level conversations where we're safe with one another and we come together and we talk about instruction or we talk around instruction, but we really don't dive deep into pressing into each other to see, why aren't my students moving? How come we haven't gotten the growth that we would have expected? When I installed or tried this strategy, it didn't fit for me and I failed. How did you do it? How can I do it better? So one of the things that in education we really want to move toward is moving away from congenial conversations and into really deep collegial conversations where we're pressing in and we're looking at data. We're asking each other difficult questions. We're trying to decide, is what I'm doing working? Is it enough? Is this growth enough growth? Is it ambitious growth for my students? Am I going to close the gap for students? Are students going to meet the benchmark? Are they going to exceed the benchmark? How can I take them from where they are further? When we move from collegial conversations, from congenial conversations to collegial conversations, we empower each other to have effective meetings that can really inform our instruction the very next day. Before the core review meetings, it's important to do some logistics and preparation. You're going to need to gather data reports. There's nothing worse than showing up to a meeting and not having the materials you need at your hands. So decide whose job this is, which person's going to be gathering those things, how they're going to gather it, what it's going to look like, making sure that the reports that are provided are clear, concise, and comprehensible for the staff that are going to utilize them. There's nothing worse than teachers showing up to have an Excel spreadsheet or a data report that is not interpretable at a quick glance for them. Teachers are very busy and it's difficult to have to interpret something that is not easily comprehensible and at a glance can help move toward action. You're going to need to have the 100% core review meeting agenda. You're going to need to, perhaps the very first time you have a meeting, you might want to do a short PowerPoint slide helping to familiarize the team with what it is that you're going to be doing. What are the steps? You can use parts of this slide to help you with that. There's logistics to consider. Reserve a room, set up technology, make sure that you've sent meeting reminders. Setting up technology is a big one. How are you going to display the data? Are you going to have a projector and a screen so you can easily manipulate between attendance data and behavior data and the screening data? Who's going to run that? Who's going to take notes? Who's going to follow up? All of those things are important. It's what I call the under the iceberg successes of a successful meeting planning. And importantly, you want to communicate what to bring. What are the curriculum materials? Quite often, it's important to have teacher bring their curriculum, their English language arts adoption materials, and any common data reports that they might want to look into as they start to plan for instruction. And it never hurts to have treats. Whenever we're meeting, we need to have those reinforcements. So when having treats available is always helpful and leads to a successful meeting. Today we're going to overview the problem-solving process. The 100% meetings, the core review meetings, utilize the problem-solving process. The problem-solving process starts out with problem identification. We want to identify what is the problem. Regardless of where we are in the success rate, we can always make improvements. In Oregon Response to Instruction Intervention, we're always looking to go through the lens of continuous cycle of improvement. So we're looking to identify where do we go next. Once we have identified that problem, we want to dive deep in and do problem analysis. Why is the problem occurring? This is really where teachers get to come together with support of other stakeholders and examine what type of instruction is happening, what are the needs of the student, where might we take them next. And we're going to develop a plan. Because quite often we get together as educators and we're good at step 1, identifying a problem, maybe step 2, even analyzing it, but then we run out of time and we don't get to really fully develop a plan to address the analysis that we've completed. Most importantly, after plan development, we actually want to have a plan to implement. And not only do we want a plan to implement, but we need a plan to evaluate. Did we do what we agreed to do? Did we do what we agreed to do, but it wasn't the right thing? Did we do what we agreed to do and we had success? We want to evaluate through the lens of a continuous cycle of improvement, not in the lens of a gotcha. We're looking to see, is our plan working? Do we need to make any refinements or adjustment? What support do we need to provide? This all leads to improved student improvement. Why do we use the problem-solving framework? We use the problem-solving framework to identify, analyze, and address needs at all levels. It really works because it's consistent, it's efficient, it's effective, and it's sustainable. We use the problem-solving framework across all levels in our response to intervention and instruction systems. Today, we're talking about using the problem-solving framework for the Tier 1 100% core review meetings. We're looking at it through the lens of all students. What is the problem? Why is the problem occurring? What are we going to do to improve outcomes? And then we're going to check in to see how it's working. In Tier 2, we're going to look at this through the lens of some students. These are our 20% or group intervention review meetings. We're going to identify what is the problem, why is the problem occurring for some students, really diving deep into the individual problems of this group and how we can amend the group problem, making a plan, what are we going to do about it, and then we're also going to have a plan to come back and see how it's working. In addition, as we move on, we're going to have the individual problem-solving meetings. You saw these 3 meetings in the graphic in the beginning of the PowerPoint. The individual problem-solving meetings, again, use the problem-solving format, going through what is the problem, why is the problem occurring, what are we going to do about it, how is it working, and evaluating that. This is through the lens of an individual student and intensifying services for that student. It does not mean individual service. It does mean that we're providing services to intensify the services that this student receives at an individual level. They may stay in a small group, but the services they receive are going to be individualized to the needs of the student. So this is problem solving across all levels of support. We have problem solving at Tier 1, problem solving at Tier 2, and problem solving at Tier 3. When you go into core review meetings, you're going to use an agenda. Here's a high-level preview of the agenda. If you have your agenda handy, you can follow along with me. Part of your agenda includes setting goals. You're going to do goal setting, looking at your previous benchmarking, current benchmarking, and setting a reasonable goal for the next benchmarking. In addition to that, in step 2, problem analysis, you're going to be able to dive deep into identifying what is the need, what is the priority skill instructional need for your group of students at a grade level. In identifying the area of need for your students, you're going to look at the Common Core State Standards Common Instructional Needs. This progression of skills includes phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We'll talk more about the progression of skills as we go further into the PowerPoint. In addition to identifying that if priority skill need academically in the area of instruction, we know that what teachers do matters most. And we're going to ask you to identify an effective instructional strategy that's going to map onto that priority skill that has been identified. Based on the work from John Hattie and in his Visible Learning book, 2009, we know that what teachers do impacts students' learning. If you look at this chart, it's a small example of the list of strategies that John Hattie identified for us in the book Visible Learning. To have an effect on students' outcome, we know that we need to have at least a 0.4 effect size. If we're at about a 0.4, we know we're going to have an impact on that student. As you can see, on the right-hand side, there are some things that we know have an effect on students. Socioeconomic status, parent involvement have a 0.57 and a 0.51. The other things that we think might have an effect on students just didn't come out to be so when John Hattie did his meta-analysis, which is a study of all the studies. School finances have a 0.23. That perplexed me, but then what I know about teachers and educators is that we really work hard given whatever resources we have. If you look to the left, what we see does have a great effect on students. We have a 0.75 on teacher clarity, a 0.73 for feedback, 0.72 for teacher-student relationships. These actions are instructional moves that teachers apply when they are instructing students, and they have a great effect on improving outcomes for students. So when we have our core review meetings, we asked teachers and teacher teams to map on instructional strategies and identify a priority skill. In addition to instructional strategies, we want to ask teacher teams to identify an active engagement strategy. An active engagement strategy looks at what students say, what students do, what are those actions, and how do we elicit those actions from students. Again, you'll see Hattie's work tied with Hattie and Yates from 2014, and I want you to notice at the bottom here, teacher as an average activator has a 0.61 effect size, teacher as an average facilitator has a 0.19 effect size. What this information is telling us is that when we use these active engagement strategies and effective instruction strategies, we consistently get better results for student learning. If you're interested in this work, I encourage you to research and get the work from Hattie and Yates. The final step of the overview of the core review meetings is you develop a plan as a team. We commit, develop a plan of action. As I work with districts across the state of Oregon, implementing these meetings, this is one of the most empowering components. Teams feel really happy to walk away with a solid plan of action that not only supports their students, but supports one another. This is your first action time. I'm going to ask you to start the timer for 90 seconds. Skim and scan the 100% meeting agenda, please. Okay, let's get to it. Now we're going to dive into the 100% meeting general features. What are the logistics? So they happen 2 to 3 times a year following the collection of your school-wide screening data. Who attends the meetings? The principal, the literacy specialist, perhaps your Title I teacher, a counselor, grade level team definitely comes. It could include special education, English language learning specialist, school psychologists, and paraprofessionals. It depends on the context and the culture of the school as to resources and time for who's attending the meetings. The critical components are the principal, literacy specialists, and the grade level team. These 100% meetings, core review meetings, happen to review school-wide screening data and to answer questions about core instruction. The hoped outcome is to identify which area of the Big Five needs additional focus and to develop a plan with a goal for improving grade level achievement. No matter where our students are, we want to take them to the higher level. So if most of my students are in the green zone, I'm going to be looking to improve their green zone outcomes, looking at the growth within that, perhaps using pathways of progress or looking at their sub-skill growth. So let's get started. Step 1 in problem identification. What is the problem? A problem is defined as discrepancy between where we want to be, where are we currently, where are our students. If I was looking at my students, Michael and Angela, my kids, where do we want them to be and where we are? We're going to use data and evidence to determine what that gap is. That's going to be our problem definition. Do we use data and problem identification, or when I first started meeting in congenial type meetings with teacher teams, it was more I think, I feel like, I believe, and quite often our hunches, my hunches, as educated as I thought they were, weren't actually right. Kids that I thought were safe weren't safe. Kids that I thought might have made exceptional growth, perhaps maybe hadn't made exceptional growth. Kids I thought were at risk weren't perhaps as at risk as I thought. When we move to using our data or evidence indicates, we have a much better decision-making process. How clearly are you currently defining problems in your school? Do you primarily rely on data, or are you still using I think, I feel, I believe? It's another action time. Review step 1 on the agenda. Record your data. If your grade level is already at 85%, perhaps you'll consider setting the goals based on the priority skill identified. We're going to go deeper into that later. Take a moment to just review your data. You don't actually need to set your goal for benchmarking at this time. Okay, we're going to dive into problem analysis. Step 2, why is the problem occurring? This is really the heart of the matter in core review meetings. We really want to take time to review and analyze what's happening for our students and empower our educator teams to problem solve together. We want to look at why the problem is happening, and we want to identify what is the grade level's priority skill need. Is the priority skill in the area of phonemic awareness? Is it in the area of phonics? Is it in the area of fluency? Is it in the area of vocabulary? Or is it in the area of comprehension? It's critical to help our teacher teams understand that there is a hierarchy of learning in the Big Five, that phonemic awareness builds on phonics, and phonics builds on fluency, and fluency impacts vocabulary and comprehension. These foundational skills impact the progression for comprehension and vocabulary. Phonemic awareness is essential to master to get to phonics. Phonics and alphabetical principle mastery leads to oral reading accuracy and fluency. We know that vocabulary and reading comprehension are utilized and adapted all the way through from infancy and beyond. We're constantly working on reading comprehension and vocabulary, even with children before they start school. But these foundational skills really build upon each other to help link the letter knowledge and fluent reading of connected text. Your DIBELS measures have proficiency skill indicators. On your core review meeting agenda, you will see a place to indicate what are the proficiency scores for your students at the grade level in phonological awareness, phonics, oral reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. This form is going to be completed during your core review meeting process. We're going to record the percent that are above benchmark in each of these sub-skill tests. These sub-skill tests for your DIBELS indicators tell us whether or not students are proficient at that early prerequisite skill. We want to help identify the earliest prerequisite skill need for identifying a priority skill. Let's talk about this. What does the priority skill need? So here's an example. We want to set the priority skill to be at least close to 80%. The priority skill that is not at 80% is the one that we're going to select as the highest skill need. So we are looking for the earliest prerequisite skill, which is not at 80%. In this example, our skill is progressing from phonemic awareness to comprehension, as we discussed earlier. Our phonemic awareness scores are at 85%. The students are in the green zone. They've met that goal of at least 80% of the students are meeting that benchmark in that priority skill, sub-skill set. The phonics skill is at 60%. We are not at 80% in the area of phonics. In the area of fluency, they're at 60%, 65%. In the area of vocabulary, they're at 75%. And I want you to notice that comprehension is at 57%. Although it is the lower score, We want to go to the earliest prerequisite skill, not the lowest score. This is going to be important as you train your teacher teams. It's really natural to lean toward wanting to go to the lowest skill number, but we're looking at the earliest prerequisite skill. So this progression of foundational skills is critical in helping to utilize this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to get to watch Summer. She will demonstrate leading her team of 6th grade teachers to complete the priority skill chart. I want you to notice that they don't have the early test indicators, and she's going to support them through this step. In this example, Summer's team has identified phonics as the priority skill. Let's watch Summer help her team identify the priority skill.
Phonological awareness, which are not pieces of 6th grade, and so we just put an X through that portion. And then phonics, for the most part, is also something that we expect kids to already have down by the time they get to 6th grade. So the NWF, those are nonsense word tests, so we cross out those next 2 as well.
So just leave the word
So
accuracy.
if we leave the accuracy there and go back to your data, it's the second one down where it says accuracy. And for your group, your kids who are on level is 82%, right? Okay. So we're going to.
So Summer's helping her teachers to complete that section. They identified each section and are going to record the scores. But really what we want to do in this area, the heart of the core review meetings, is helping teacher teams decide what do your students need in the priority skill area. Just because we've identified the area of phonics, we have not arrived. If you have your agenda handy, you'll notice that in phonics, as we have a prerequisite skill progression in the Big Five, we have prerequisite skill progression in each area. So in phonics, there are a number of skills that I need to master to be able to begin to develop fluency. I also want you to notice that vocabulary and comprehension have strategies and concepts we're working on all throughout the skill level development. In this next video, we're going to watch Summer help her students lead her team to deciding which part of phonics is the most pressing need. So they've identified phonics as the priority skill in the prerequisite of skill building, but they need to know which part of phonics is most important for their students.
Perspective, with 5th grade, knowing within that chunk there if there are any needs, and maybe you guys will have a better idea of, do they know irregularly spelled words? Do they know silent E? That kind of stuff. Or we might go further over and look at multisyllabic words.
That's what I'm thinking. And prefixes and suffixes.
That's the one I highlighted as well.
Did you?
Well, thank
We
goodness.
were working on that and
Yeah,
saying
I
that they
just
were
see
needing
that.
that.
And most of the 5th graders I've tested so far this year, it's been multisyllabic words, prefixes, suffixes. Little bit.
So what you notice there is that there was a multi-stakeholder team. The special education teacher was there. The principal came in with a bottle of water. Summer was facilitating the thinking and helping the team dive deeper into what area of phonics is the high priority need. The teachers were collaborating and they had this aha moment of, oh yes, that actually confirms what I'm seeing in the classroom. These core review meetings are really an opportunity to help teachers understand that we're facilitating thinking time. We're moving from that congenial conversation to those collegial conversations and really pressing in and helping to identify where do our students need to go next to reach to higher levels. In this example, they looked deeply into phonics. Here's another action time. What is your current database decision-making meeting structure? Do you have something like this? And how is this system a new or different way of looking at data? We'll have 90 seconds again. Okay, this is a 30-second check-in. I gave you 90 seconds. If you haven't moved to the second question, please do so, and we'll complete our 2 minutes. Okay, welcome back. I hope you found that time to talk to your partner, your neighbor, about what your current database decision-making meeting structure is and how this system is new or a different way of looking at data useful. We're going to move on to step 3, plan identification. How should we address the priority skill needs? So we've identified that the student's priority skill need is in the area of phonics, and in the example that Summer provided for us, we had the specificity of it was multisyllabic and decoding. Just because we've identified that high priority skill need and something from our curriculum that will match and that we'll utilize to address that skill, what we know is that having common agreements around those teaching practices are really going to be the game changer. So we need a game plan to address that. And that moves us into plan development. What are we going to do to make changes? So one of the things that we know that is that it's not just about the learner. We like to use in Oregon RTI the example of fish in a fishbowl. Has anybody ever gotten a goldfish? How long do they live? How long do we expect them to live? When the fish, I'm sorry to say, maybe turns up sideways fairly quickly, we don't ever go, oh, that fish. We might first think, oh, I forgot to put food in, or the bowl was too small. We didn't have enough air in the water. I didn't provide it into the right environment. It was really right in the hot sun. So we look at things around the fish. We focus on the water. We look at what did we provide for the fish? How did we support the fish? We don't go straight to blaming the fish. In education, we want to look at the instruction, the curriculum, and the environment. That's our water. What kind of instruction do we provide to students? Do we have the correct curriculum, and are we doing it in the right environment? ICE. We focus on ICE. Instruction is how you teach. Curriculum is what you teach. The environment is where we teach. The learner is who we have the least control over. That's who we teach. Our students come to us as they are, and it's our job to take them to the next level. We have a growth mindset, and we know that we can move students from where they come to us to that next level. And we want to close any type of achievement gap or take them even higher onto elevated expectations to achieve high outcomes. Focusing on instruction, curriculum, and environment helps us do that. We've identified a high priority need, which we can address with curriculum, but we really need to look at the instruction that we're going to provide. And that's part of plan development. As a teacher team, this is where the power of that collegial work really comes together. We're going to make common agreements around curriculum. What tools can we use to address the curriculum? We're going to make common agreements around instruction, how we instructionally serve the student, and environment. We control all of these things for our students. And we can provide professional learning opportunities to allow our staff to implement these agreements. Sometimes, if one of my teacher team members is really gung-ho and has an idea and a strategy that's evidence-based and it's going to meet our needs for developing, as in Summer's example, that multisyllabic decoding strategy, but maybe as a new team member, I'm not familiar with it, I might need some professional learning, some video support, maybe a peer observation to help me implement those agreements. But we're going to do it together, and we're going to have a plan. That is the power of the core review meeting. These common instructional strategies are critical because we know that instruction is more important than curriculum. We know that when an instructor provides explicit instruction, or if an instructor provides corrective feedback after initial student responses, or if instructor engages students in meaningful interactions with language during lessons, these are those teacher moves, the under iceberg moments that Hattie is referring to in his research that really make a difference for improving outcomes for students. So as part of the core review meetings, teacher teams are going to need to select instructional strategies. And the teacher team is going to select one instructional strategy to map onto the selected priority skill need. Let me say that again. Teacher teams are going to select one common instructional strategy to map onto the identified priority skill need. So in Summer's example, they chose multisyllabic and decoding words. They're going to need to select a strategy that best meets that priority skill. When leading teams through this piece of the agenda, we ask teams to quietly select on their own what they think would be the best match and then share that. It's important to go through this step because I might hear from one person an idea that's going to solidify or change my thinking. Perhaps I would select student engages in meaningful interactions with language during the lesson, but after hearing from my colleague David, I might actually agree that instructor provides multiple opportunities for students to practice instructional tasks is a better match. Allowing each teacher team to select independently and then share and talk in that very collegial way about why I selected it and have a deep discussion is the power of the core review meetings. In addition to selecting one as a team, what we need to do is when we've decided on what that common instructional strategy will be, we have to decide when this is working, what will it look like? How long and how often will we do this strategy? If we're going to use instructor provides multiple opportunities for students to practice instructional tasks, is David going to do it one time on Mondays when his students enter, and I'm going to provide it at whole group instruction in the beginning of the lesson and to introduce small group instruction daily? We need to be on the same page. We need to have the same expectations and the same routines so we can determine if what we're doing is working or not, and so that we can support one another. So we need to have agreement on when we're going to do it, how long we're going to do it, and how often we're going to do it. And as a team, we're going to decide what we're going to do. It's difficult. They're all good strategies, but this is the one that we're going to select, the dragon we're going to slay at the end of the night. We go to lay our head on the bed, the pillow, to say, oh, I really nailed instructor provides multiple opportunities to practice instructional tasks. It doesn't mean I won't be doing some of these other strategies. It just means that when I'm introducing multisyllabic decoding words, as Summer's team was deciding in that example, this is the strategy that we're going to use to introduce that practice. In addition to instructional strategies, we know that student engagement is critical. We want to keep students involved. We want to have oral responses, written responses, action responses. We want to increase that active engagement, and we want it to map onto that priority skill need. We want our students saying things, doing things, writing things, and acting out things. And we want it to be tied to what we see as the highest area of need for our students. So just like we selected an effective instructional strategy, we're going to select as a team an active engagement strategy. Once again, this is done independently with the idea of we've mapped out what our priority skill need is. It is phonics, and we went even deeper and we decided that it was multisyllabic and decoding. And we decided that multiple opportunities was the instructional strategy. What's going to match best with that, given these choices of oral responses, written responses, action responses? In this example, behavioral responses isn't appropriate. There may be times when that would work for you. Again, the team is going to make a decision to choose one. The same process of each selecting and sharing should be utilized so that we can learn and support one another and have those deep collegial conversations. Perhaps you'll choose written responses, using response slates and having students hold them up. Perhaps a graphic organizer, or completing sentence frames. What is important is that the team decides together, and then they discuss when it's working, what will it look like, how long and how often. The same process we used for that instructional strategy. We need to have an agreement before we leave the room as to when are we going to do it, how often are we going to do it, and in what setting are we going to do it. Are we going to do it just in small group, or are we going to do it in whole group? Are we going to introduce it in whole group and do it with some students in small group to reinforce the skill? Those are the power of these teaming collegial decisions. This is up to your team to decide based on what you know about your classroom, your resources, your tools, and your supports. Having said that, sometimes it may be difficult to implement what I've just agreed to or what's been described to me. We have to consider, do teachers have the skills to implement the changes to the core? It can take up to 20 times of trying to implement a new teaching move to begin to develop proficiency within that strategy. We want to address professional development needs as a result of this teaming. This needs to be adhered to. It's one of the foundational pillars within the Oregon Response to Instruction and Intervention House. We want to coach for success. So please don't forget the adult learning component, which is at the bottom of the core review and meeting agenda. What professional learning or support is needed to support your commitments to implement the agreed upon actions? What might that look like? It could be model lessons by a coach or a peer. It could be peer lesson observation. It could be a video of a master teacher doing the strategy. If you're doing multisyllabic decoding, there's lots of routines from Anita Archer's website. You can access videos and web's resources. I know that you have experts there to support you. You might even have in-school experts that you can provide training at staff meetings before or after school or at PLC meetings. You might have some instructional highlights at a staff meeting. And don't forget to include your paraprofessionals if they're servicing the students that you're discussing. Now that we've gone through step 1, problem identification, step 2, problem analysis, and we have a solid plan in place. We have a plan developed to support our students. Again, one of the things that we see in education is we're not too bad about identifying problems, and then we might make that analysis. Plan development is critical, but really what really makes a difference, where the rubber meets the road, where we get the big bang for our buck, where we see results, is plan implementation and evaluation. We have to implement what we planned. And along with that, we have to have a plan for checking in to see how that's going. Evaluating, is it working? Should we make any changes? Do we need to monitor or adjust? Plan implementation and evaluation are really critical components. How do we ensure that we implement our plan? We want to make sure that the plans that we agreed to as a team aren't just on paper, but that when we go back to our classrooms, we are going to implement what we agreed to, even if it's a struggle, so that we can support one another. Some of the ways to help do that is to make those plans public. Public accountability in a positive manner. I'll show you an example of how one school has done that. We also want to revisit these agreements at regular PLC meetings, your PLT or SAT times. Whenever your teams get together as a grade level to problem solve and think about data and think about student instruction, you'll want to revisit your core review meeting agreements and see how things are going. Don't wait to the very end of the year to check in on it. And another thing that we encourage and train school districts to do is to have principal walkthroughs to support the meeting commitments. If I've committed to do this in whole group and in small group at the beginning of the lesson, principals know when to go through to see this and what materials or support that they might need to provide for them to see how it's going. Not in teacher evaluation manner, but in what support do you need? How can I help you? Do you need a video? Would you like me to free you up to observe a teacher providing that instruction? Principal walkthroughs through supporting and seeing how is scaling of this going. Here's an example of 100% meeting, core review meeting agreements posted in a staff room. You can see that they took their core meeting agreements and put them right above. This is, you don't see it, but the copy machine is right below. So as everyone's in the copy room making copies, I can see what the priority skill level is for all grade levels. I can see what the common instructional strategy need is, the common engagement strategy, when they're doing it, how often they're doing it, and what the professional learning focus is. As a teacher, it really empowers me to see how we're syncing up instruction and aligning things for our students across the content and across the school. I can start to have conversations with my colleagues around, hey, I'm actually doing crawl responding too. How's that going for you? I can admit that I've had an epic fail in my queuing system and maybe ask for support in a safe manner. Going public in a safe and secure manner. Most importantly, though, in implementation and evaluation is that ongoing support. In our last video, you're going to see Tim Larkin, the principal at Gaston Elementary School in Oregon, review the expectations that were made by Summer and her team and create a monitoring plan. Let's listen to Tim as he wraps things up for his team.
So the core can be used for this. Monday, decoding routine repeated on additional days of the week. Difficult when half have it already. Use it during whole group. Or I put whole group, introduce the routine, small group, revisit the routine with student texts.
What you see is Tim summarizing the agreements that were made by the team, and he's keeping a list of things that he's going to need to do to support his teacher team. And after this, he and I met to create and support a monitoring plan and a professional development plan. You can also see through this little clip that meetings don't have to be in fancy places. He did bring treats. It's one of Tim's strong points. They all have water. Teachers brought their teaching materials, and it was a really healthy, positive environment for collaboration, moving to those deep teacher conversations to make instructional decisions for students and improve outcomes. These teacher teams are moving from islands of expertise to collaborative teacher teams. This language is actually taken directly from teacher teams who've participated in core review meetings and felt that syncing up and that success. They felt empowered to make better decisions. They felt empowered to support one another through the use of the core review meeting agenda and planning. They've moved to a culture of collaboration, moving from isolation to collaboration and thinking of that continuous cycle of instruction and improvement, taking students from where they are to higher levels. They were empowered by thinking of where their students are starting to where they can take them next. And most importantly, rather than thinking of my students and my classroom, they've moved from a place of my students, my classroom, to our students, our grade level, our school. I thank you for your time today and encourage you, if you have questions or need support, to visit our website at www.oregonrti.org.